الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Continuing our lessons in Umdatul Fiqh of Imam Ibn Qudaamah rahimahullah. Last week we were talking about the miqat, mawaqit, az-zamaniyya wal makaniyya, the physical and the timing, and the mawaqit, the places and the timing in which you make hajj. And after that, the Shaykh, he moves into completing that chapter and then going towards al-ihram. So we'll finish that part, issue number 976, in which the Shaykh rahimahullah says, وَالْأَفْضَلُ, and he says, and what is better is that someone does not do ihram قبل miqat, before the miqat. So we said last week there are two types, the makan. So makaniya is the place in which someone makes miqat. We said there were 5 of them. And we said that the miqat or mawaqit zamaniyya timing is 3, which is the months, the Shawwal, the Qaadir, the Hijjah. So here the Shaykh saying that it's not preferred to start or entering ihram before the miqat. And what is meant by that is before somebody passes the miqat al-makani or the miqat zamani, time or place. You're not supposed to go into ihram before that. So what does this mean? What is ihram? That's the question. And the problem is for many people, when they hear ihram, they think the clothing. Ihram is a state you enter into for hajj or umrah. In this case, hajj. So al-ihram هو نية الدخول في نسك, for nusk, في nusuk. Niyya, it's a niyya you have entering into the nusuk. So it's not the clothing you're wearing, it's the niyyah, intention. So for example, the scholars say if somebody wants to get into the state of ihram, you have the intention, and we're going to see you profess it out loud, and then comes the actions, which is the wearing the clothes, right? The ridan, the 2 white shrouds. But it's not necessary to say that, or correct to say that the miqat, the ihram is just the clothing. This is not correct. Because, for example, the scholars say if someone went home was trying on their ihram, the actual white cloths, he's not in the state of ihram. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. He has no niyyah, he's just putting it on or is trying it on. Another example would be somebody who, he doesn't have his 2 white cloths and he has to pass the miqat. He can still enter ihram. And he can make some change, we said, with his clothes, put on whatever he has, and later change into 2 white garments when he has a chance. Hence, all of this shows the niyyah. This is what ihram means, the niyyah. So going back to last week, we said that if somebody is traveling by plane and comes very close to the miqat, what should they do? They should put on their clothes earlier. There's fear that they're going to miss it. But they only pronounce their intention when they get close to it or just as they're passing. See the difference there? The clothing you can put on whenever, airport, at home. So the brother asked a question, in Bangladesh they put it on before they leave on the airplane. That's the clothing, that's not the ihram by itself, it's the niyyah. So when we say ihram, it's not just the clothing, because the clothing you put it on any time. So now that we understand that by so many people, they put it on the plane, some people put it on before, but what's important is the niyyah. The niyyah, you don't do it 6 hours before. No, you still do it just before. And so the Shaykh now is saying you shouldn't do it except before or just about to pass the actual place of miqat. But what's the ruling if you did it before? He says the ulama now divide this issue into different types. They say there's a hukm taklifi wa hukm wad'i. There's a legislative ruling in terms of reward and punishment, and there's a ruling revolving around acceptability or invalidity. So when it comes to the halal or haram, if a person did the ihram, entered the intention to enter the ihram before passing the miqat, the first opinion amongst the scholars that it is haram to do that. You're not allowed to enter in niyyah. You can't have the intention to enter into the state of ihram or enter the state of performing the hajj rites before the miqat. It's haram. And the second opinion, which is amongst different scholars, and this is also the madhab of Imam Ahmed, it is makruh, it's disliked. It's disliked. And the more correct opinion is that it's haram. Because Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam taught us how to do the ihram, and he did not teach us to do it well before passing the actual place. And he said, خُذُوا عَنِّي مَنَاسِكَكُمْ, take your hajj rites from me. وَخَيْرُ الْهَدِي هَدِي النَّبِيِّ صلى الله عليه وسلم. And also the scholars, they bring proof from some of the Salaf, Imam bin Hussein and others, Umar, that they got upset at some people who were doing ihram well before the passing of the actual place. For example, some people were doing the ihram from Basra all the way in Iraq, and then they were coming for Hajj. So Uthman criticized them for that. Because the only reason why we have these places to show us that when you're passing them is when you do the ibadah. It's a place to pass in the time. And ibadah in general cannot be just done whenever. But one now, hukum wad'i, does it count or doesn't count? If it's haram to do it, but in terms of validity, it's valid, it counts. Because the person has done the ihram in the time. Al-hajju ashhurun ma'lumat. So they suffice to miqat al-zamani. You're in the time periods, Shawwal, Dhul Qa'dah wa Dhul Hijjah. If you're in these 3 months, then this is a time for Hajj. So if we did it in that time period, but before the place, it counts, but you did haram. And how is it possible that it counted and you did haram? Well, the validity is based on other things. Right? There's 2 miqats, time and place. But sin has to revolve around following the command of the Prophet ﷺ or not. So it's possible in Sharia some things are haram, but it still counts. And we talked about before. Someone made Hajj with haram money. He meets all the obligations, all the conditions, he did everything, but he did a mistake. He took haram money. Counts, but with sin. So if you understand that, in Usul al-Fiqh we have ahkam wad'iyya and ahkam taklifiyya. Taklifiyya are the 5, wajib, mustahab, mubah, makruh, right? These things, right? These ones, haram, all this. And when it comes to taklifiyya, the wad'iyya, it's to do with valid, sahih or fasid, invalid, etc., etc. So here we're talking about validity. It counts, but you shouldn't have done that. So now we become clear. So if you're going to go for, let's say, Hajj from Canada, you are allowed to put on your ihram in the airport, although nobody does that, right? But if you're going to do it, it's allowed. But when it comes to the niyyah, you do it when you're close. Which leads to a question now. Some of the ulama, noticing that they mention and highlight a good point, which is in today's time, if it's not allowed to enter the intention, have the ihram before passing the miqat, today in airplanes, especially for example you're flying in Air Saudiya, they will tell you, or in other Muslim airlines, where you are and how close you are to the miqat. But some of the shuyukh, like Shaykh Sa'ad Khatlan, he mentioned this point specifically. He says the airplane is traveling at 800 kilometers to 1,000 kilometers per hour. So the timing in which it's going to pass, because the miqat is not that far. Right? Anyone remembers some of the distances? 90, 80 kilometers. So if the airplane is going at 1,000 kilometers an hour, and you only supposed to do it before you pass the miqat, it's possible a few minutes. Just within 1 minute, it's possible you can miss it. So he says in this case, it's recommended to be safer to pronounce the intention, to make your intention, to pronounce your entering the state of Umrah or Hajj, just sometime before, a few minutes or so before that, even out of fear. And that's permissible, he says. Because even though we're saying it's haram now, it is a hajjah, right? And some of the scholars, they view this makruh, not haram. So whoever said, the scholars said it's makruh, they said if it's makruh, makruhat, dislike things become permissible when there's a need. And haram things become permissible when there's a necessity. So the point he's trying to show here is that be careful with that. Some people, they're just sitting back, they don't realize how fast the plane is going. You're not on the car. You're not walking. It's going fast. So in all of this being said, if somebody is in a state of doubt, and they did the ihram before, out of fear, then inshallah there's no sin in that, knowing that there's a difference of opinion if it's haram to do that, also out of confusion, he's not sure. But in most of the airlines, Muslim airlines, you have the map. You can see as you're going, and roughly what estimate time is coming, so you can also use that to judge. But if you're traveling with some other foreign airline, fear Allah as much as you can and try to do it. And the rule is that it's allowed to go in before, but it's haram to do after because we mentioned before, going after is where you have to pay the fidya or the blood sacrifice. As for coming before, then the scholars differ if it's haram or not. طيب, now the issue, Shaykh says the next issue, that issue 977, if he did this, and he entered ihram before, then he's counting as being a muhrim. He is in the state of ihram, because we mentioned the difference of opinion on this issue. As some scholars say it's permissible. 978. He says, in the time or the months for Hajj are Shawwal, Dhul Qa'dah, and the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. So now the Shaykh is talking about, and the Imam, about what is the miqat az-zamani, the time period. And we already mentioned this last week, it's 3 months. Al-Hajj ashhuru ma'lumat. Hajj is specified months, appointed months. Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 197. So scholars say it is 3 months. Shawwal, and then Dhul Qa'dah and Dhul Hijjah. But the Shaykh didn't say Dhul Hijjah, he just said the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. Which again, is a difference of opinion. Is it the whole month or just the first 10 days? And why does he mention the first 10 days? Because Hajj is which days? First 10 days? 8, 9, 10. After that is Eid and then the rest of the things, those who are in Hajj, they're going to continue with their rights. But it's 8, 9, 10. So they say that after that, is Ayyam al-Tashriq is done. So before getting to a difference of opinion, what if somebody went and performed Hajj, his niyyah, has to enter the state of ihram before the Ashhur Hajj? So we said the last one, it's permissible, according to some scholars, but the best opinion is haram to enter before the place, before you pass the miqat, its physical place. How about performing, or the intention, or entering the state of ihram before the time of Hajj? For example, someone does it before Shawwal. Scholars, they differed, and what's most correct is that there's 3 opinions. One opinion says it doesn't count. The second opinion says that it counts. And the third one is that it doesn't count as Hajj, but it counts as Umrah. So I'll give you an example now. Imagine somebody, for some odd reason, he wants to perform Hajj in Ramadan. Right? So his niyyah, he's going to make his niyyah now. So now, what are we going to do with this person? We're going to tell him, okay, now you're still ihram. The group opinion who said, the first group who said it's allowed, or sorry, not allowed, they said clearly Allah said Al-Hajj ashhur ma'lumat. Hajj is specific months, specified. And that means the 3 months. So therefore it can count. So that's obviously the correct opinion, but the one after, the third opinion, which is that it counts as Umrah and Hajj. Which is that it doesn't count from Hajj, because Allah says Hajj is 3 months. But it counts as Umrah. This is the view of Shafi'iyah. It changes. Because they said Umrah is open the whole season, and Umrah is a smaller Hajj. Hence, if someone did it before that, it counts as Umrah, and this is the view of Shafi'i, and also there's narrations from Jabir bin Abdullah, Ibn Abbas, and others that they held that view. So they're arguing that if you did it, it will count only as Umrah, but not Hajj. And we know Umrah in Ramadan, for example, is highly rewarded. The third opinion, which was that it counts, is the view of the Zahiriyya, and this is da'if. It's a da'if opinion. And their argument is that there's no proof against it. But they say there's no amr from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that says you couldn't do that, which is telling you what is the preferred time. And we can see a fa'idah, just a benefit. The Zahiriyya, Ibn Hazm, for example, and Dawud Zahiri, the originator of the madhab, there are some differences that they have in their usul than other madhabs. And one of them is istishab. Where they have the view that if there's no clear-cut evidence in the Quran and Sunnah, clear evidence, clear commands or prohibitions, then you go back to the original ruling, which is ibaha. What the argument is, al-istishab is you keep things the way they are. So this is very important. We see Zahiri say that something, sometimes you look, they don't have evidence. They say there's no evidence, therefore the ruling is allowed. But the other group of scholars, the 4 madhabs, they don't agree with this use of istishab. It's too much opening the door of the idea that you need a specific text. Very important. When you study this, you'll see differences. Some of the differences come to usul. Just as we see that Hanafis sometimes differ with the other scholars, it sometimes has to do with the usul. So the idea is there a clear hadith that says you can't do this? Is there a clear ayat that says you can't do this? All the ayat say is that Hajj should be done in 3 months. It's specified. So they're saying then therefore it goes to allowance. But the other scholars say no, because the benefit behind the 3 months, Allah mentions, the Hajj is in these months, is due to rational reasons, as well as the Sahaba understood this. Sahaba understood, some of them, that you couldn't do it before it. And Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah says that if you go down to the ayah, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ قُلْ هِيَ مَوَاقِيتُ النَّاسِ الْحَجِّ. Say they ask you about the crescent moon. It is a time for the timing for people and Hajj. Here Allah is telling us that there is time for Hajj and it's based on the moon. It's moon sighting. So Ibn Taymiyyah's argument was that rationally there's no benefit of having a miqat zamani if you're never going to use it or it has no specific meaning. If you told me you could do your niyyah anytime, what's the point of the 3 months of Hajj? So even from that angle, you can see that the Zahiri, they made the mistake by looking only for clear-cut evidence. And this is something to pay attention to when you look at the different views of the madhahib, the ulama, to see how they reach the conclusions. And you can see in this case, because they said there's no evidence, but the ulama said there is evidence, and there's a wisdom behind the ayat being said. Hence, the correct opinion, wallahu a'lam, is the third one, is that it becomes the view of the Shafi'iyyah, that it becomes Umrah, it will become Umrah, but not Hajj. And if you took the first opinion that it's not Hajj, then still that's the correct opinion in some degrees. So you cannot perform the Hajj or enter the state of Ihram before the miqat zamani, which is 3 months. Shawwal, Dhul Qa'dah, and Dhul Hijjah. You see a difference between the two then miqat. We can see a difference now. طيب, now the Shaykh, he said that 3 months was Shawwal, Dhul Qa'dah, and Dhul Hijjah, but he says Ashr Dhul Hijjah. Ashr min Dhul Hijjah. Why the 10? Scholars then here, they say that the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, he mentions because those are the periods in which are the days of Hajj, in terms of arriving, in terms of people doing their Umrah, doing Hajj Tamattu', or etc., etc. So the scholars, they differ. What exactly are the days? Is the whole month the first 10 days? And without getting into all the details, the correct view is the whole month. So it's all the month of Shawwal, all the month of Dhul Qa'dah, and all the months of Dhul Hijjah count as the months of Hajj. And this opinion is the view of the Imam Malik. This is the Maliki view. That's what Imam Qudaamah mentions, the Hanbali view. The Hanbali says the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, and then the Dhul Qa'dah the whole month, Shawwal the whole month. As for the Shafi'is, they say it's Dhul Hijjah, first 9 days. Again, all of this has to do with the intended purpose, but they look at the evidences. Scholars, when they say look at the evidence, Allah says, Al-Hajju ashhuru ma'lumat. When he uses this wording, they say it includes generality, all of it. You can specify one of them without clear evidence. As for the other scholars, again, they try to use the proof Al-Hajju Arafah. That Shafi'i, they try to use that view. Hajj Arafah, that's the 9th. So Allah, the Prophet Muhammad called Hajj Arafah. So after that, it's not Hajj. Yeah? Is that going to work? Right? Some of us are convinced by that. Scholars say, no, this is not enough, right? Because just emphasizing that point. It's not saying that isn't. So, Wallahu A'lam, the whole 3 months. But does that mean someone's going to perform Hajj outside of that? Yeah? Someone's going to make the niyyah for Hajj in the 20th of the Dhul Hijjah? No, you're not going to do that. طيب, inshallah. Now the author moves into Bab al-Ihram, the actual adab al-Ihram. So we said Ihram is niyyah. So the author is going to tell us now how to enter in the state of Ihram, what does it include, and all the rules regarding that. And so the idea is, as you can see, as you're preparing for Hajj, there are the stages. So we talked about the conditions of it. We talked about now the mawaqit, the places and the time for it. Now we're talking about the entering the state of it. So Bab al-Ihram, issue 979, is whoever wants to perform Ihram is recommended the day they shower, يعني the ghusl. And so this is the first adab, that you do ghusl before you enter the state of Ihram. And then making the niyyah. And Ihram, the niyyah behind it is to enter in the state to perform the rituals of Hajj or Umrah. So when you enter the state, certain things become haram. So that's why it's important to understand when you make a state of Ihram, you made the intention to go and perform the ritual rites, whether it be Umrah or Hajj, and while in that state, some things are haram for you. For example, as we'll see, perfume, using perfume, or cologne, these kind of things. So the first one is showering, and the proof for this is bring the hadith of Asma bint Umays, and also Sahih Aisha, that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he passed through Khalifa, he went in the state of Ihram. First he showered, then he went to the state of Ihram. Hadith Muslim. So there's hadith of Asma bint Umays, and also Hadith Aisha, and also Hadith Zayd bin Thabit. All of this shows the Prophet ﷺ, he did that. So that's the first adab. How? And that's when you go to the mawaqit, you see in each place there's a shower. Right? Why is there? So you can use it. And now we go back to the knowledge. We already covered ghusl before. Who can remind us? Sifat al-ghusl or ightisal. How many types of ghusl are there? 2 types. What are they? Okay, so Hayd Maymuna, Hayd Aisha, but those are all one type. As a ghusl wa kamil. There's the 2 types of ghusl. The base level, mujzi, and then the kamil, complete one. So the basic one, you do what's necessary. Just start with Bismillah, wash your mouth and nose, and you cover your whole body. That's a basic ghusl, right? And the sunnah one is the one we know, the ghusl of janaba, right? So here, when it says ghusl, what kind of ghusl are you going to do? You have a choice. You could do either one. The ghusl, what's kamil, is the one that we find Hayy Aisha Maymuna. You start with wudu and then all the way through. And the other one is just do the basics. And scholars, they differ again what the basic is, but we're going to take this opinion that you do the niyyah, you say Bismillah, you rinse your mouth and nose, then you wash your whole body. That's the basics. Another group of scholars say the niyyah and wash the whole body. That's it. Right, so the real difference of opinion is the madmada wal istinshaq. That's where they differed. And if you remember in our classes a long time ago in ghusl, we said the reason why they argued on this is why? Right, is the face and the mouth and nose part of the face? Yes, it's part of the body, so they say you have to do it. So if someone did any type of ghusl, the basic one or the complete one, it counts. And all of this is recommended. If you don't have time, because you're running late, you don't have to do it. Okay, the next one now, issue 980, the Shaykh says it's recommended, Qudaamah says, rahimahullah, it's recommended now to clean yourself. Yatanadhafu here means take away anything which is necessary to cut. In other words, the khisal al-fitrah. So we know there are things that you do from the asbab, the things from the sunan al-fitrah, which are cutting the nails, right? Shaving the pubic hair, plucking the underarm hair, shortening the mustache, and the likes. These are called the sunan al-fitrah. Now the Shaykh says it's recommended before entering state ihram to do that. But the qawl al-sahih, correct opinion, is laysa min sunan al-ihram. There's no evidence to say before the ihram you're going to be trimming your mustache, and the Nabi Sallallahu didn't do that. So the correct opinion is not from ihram. But if someone needs to do it, then it's recommended to do it. Why? When you enter state ihram, can you trim your mustache? No. Cut your nails? No. How about putting perfume? You shouldn't be doing those things. So if you're not going to be able to do it, they say it's recommended to do before if you need to. Which leads us to an issue, because the sunan al-fitrah, many times you find people, they don't study this. Some ulama have written big books on it. And it's some big books on sunan al-fitrah alone, ahkam of it. And I believe it's something worthy of study because it goes back to the deen and shows Islam and purification and cleanliness. Islam is deen and nadafa, purification and cleanliness. But just a basic idea, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he gave us some guidelines regarding this, what to take away, but also time period. So scholars say, if somebody wishes to remove this stuff at that time, it's only if he needs to, then he should. Otherwise, he doesn't have to. There's nothing in the deen about that at that time. But in general, what's the guidelines? In what time period we're supposed to do this kind of things? Once every 40 days. Anas, once every 40 days. So scholars say removing the pubic hair, the underarm hair, etc. Once before the 40 days is recommended, right? After the 40 days, right, is disliked. And to do it to the point your body or yourself look like the way the appearance of disbelievers and those people who are not concerned with it is haram. So that's a good guideline to remember. It's makruh to pass the 40 days. Haram to leave your beard or his mustache, for example, and your nails and stuff until it becomes look like the people of kufr. And we know, for example, other religions, some of them they leave this stuff. So Islam says cut it. For example, someone's mustache is so long and it's haram. But if it's after 40 days, it's makruh, and before that it's recommended. So that's just general guidelines that you're mindful of it. And this is something that should be taught. These issues should be revived and they're taught because they're part of the deen. طيب, now we go to the next one, which is issue 980. 981. And it says it's recommended before entering the state of ihram to perfume. Pay attention, before the state of ihram. So performing, before you enter the state of ihram, recommend to perfume the head and the beard. The head and the beard. This is for the men, huh? The head and the beard. And what is it for or benefit behind Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did, Aisha. That she says, I could see the shine or the traces of musk on the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's head. I need the separation in his hair, because he parted where he parts his hair. And Hadith Muslim also mentions the beard. So this is recommended. As for putting it on the thiyab, the clothing, this is prohibited. To do it. But prohibited in the state of ihram. So you shouldn't put it on the clothes. It's prohibited to put on the clothes. But if it happened before, we'll talk about what are you going to do. But the idea is you should not put on the clothes. That's not allowed. The body, the head, and the hair. So for example, when you go for example, the miqat, Dhul Hulayfa, you're going to be taking some of that and you're going to put on your hair. Right? Perfume, you put on your beard, you put on your body. As for the clothes, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, وَلَا ثَوْبًا, you should not wear clothes, مَسَّهُ زَعْفَرَانَ أَوْ وَرَسْ. Hadith Muslim, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, when it comes to ihram, do not wear clothing which have been touched by saffron or waras, another kind of sweet smelling scent. And so that means, before ihram, you don't put on your clothes. But if you got onto it, what do you do? This is the next issue. You got on it, what are you supposed to do? Scholars say, if you got onto your clothes, then in this case, let's imagine somebody, before a state of ihram, he had some perfume onto his clothes, by accident or whatever happened, and then he wore it. If he wore it already, while it had perfume, there's nothing wrong now, because it's already too late, he put it on. But what he has to do is that if he takes it off, he should wash it, then put it back on. But he's not allowed to take it off and then put it back on. Why? Because in that case, he's putting it on while it's perfumed. Before it was already perfumed. For example, maybe somebody he by accident perfumed himself and all his clothes, everything. Now he put himself in state of ihram, it counts. But when he takes it off, then he should clean it to remove the scent and then put it back on. But the point is, you shouldn't put on the clothes to begin with to avoid this kind of situation. Because this is not from the state of ihram. So clear? So try to avoid altogether doing that. So scholars, they mention if someone did do that out of ignorance or by accident, then once he knows that, he will later take it off, clean it, and put it back on. Because you're allowed to clean the ihram, right? You can do that. So that's the next adab. You shouldn't put it onto the clothes. The third one now, the Shaykh is going to mention, is that he removes any clothing which is, and the word we're using here is makhiyat. But makhiyat doesn't mean stitched. It's a wrong translation. We should change the wording. The ulama say makhiyat means clothing which specifies body parts. So that's the second one. You take off normal clothing. Let's just say that. Normal clothing we have. The word makhiyat, the ulama, the fuqaha, they use this word to refer to regular everyday clothing. It doesn't mean stitched clothing. This is a misunderstanding. Because otherwise you can't wear your sandals. They have stitches, right? Right? See, where they go with this. If that's why you have to ask the question, can I wear a belt? What does that have to do with ihram? You can wear a belt. But they say it has stitches. No, this is the wrong understanding. Makhiyat is the wrong word to be used in today's context because it doesn't specify the intent. The ulama, when they use this word, some of them, the fuqaha, what they meant is street clothing, the regular clothing you wear. Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah mentioned Sharh Umdah, it means wearing clothing masnu' ala qadr al-'adl, clothing that specifies sleeves and legs. Examples, that's why the Prophet said don't wear a qamis, because it has a hand, left hand, right hand. Or pants, left leg, right leg. Like that. Those kind of clothing that specify the body parts. When you put on the ihram, the two shrouds, it doesn't specify anything. Just wraps all of it and wraps on top. So what does it mean then? The regular clothing. You're going to wear the shroud. That's what you're going to wear. The white clothing. So it's very important. If we explain to people, makhiyat doesn't mean that. Mean stitched. That wording is better to avoid scholars saying, use the term that it means the clothing which specifies the body parts. And this, the scholars say, is that it's recommended, right, when state ihram, to do this. Especially we're going to see in terms of the color too. But you have to, as the Prophet told us, not to wear the regular clothing. And this obviously has to do with if somebody didn't have anything else besides that, can he get into the state ihram? They say yes. So the most correct opinion, wallahu a'lam, is that it's recommended, not haram, in the sense that if someone wore something else Like he wore a thobe and he just put it around his shoulders, and he just like tied his, a towel or something, or like something like izar, it counts. And this is a more correct opinion, but the scholars, they say it only should be the situation when somebody had no choice to do it. So when entering ihram, you shouldn't do that. But if someone had no other situation but this, then this is the permissible until he's able to. So to explain it easier, when you enter state ihram, take off those clothes, put on your 2 white shrouds. If you don't have anything, take off the regular clothes, wrap it around your body as a rida, as an upper garment, and the other one's a lower garment, and later try to change into the 2. This is the best way to understand it. Because Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is what he did when he got ready for the ihram. He removed the regular clothing. And in scholars say if someone deliberately wore or continued to wear regular street clothing or normal clothing, even after able to change into the shrouds, some of them say there's fidya and some say there's no, don't. But you should avoid that. And then now leads us to the next thing, which is what he should wear. He says, issue 900 and 983, that he wears an izar and rida. Izar is the lower garment, so like you see the towel you wrap, the lower. So there's 2 pieces of cloth. Both are white. One you wrap on below as an izar, and the second one you wrap on top as over your shoulders as a rida. And this is what the Sahaba and Salaf generally used to wear as part of their clothing. Sometimes they wear izar rida, right? So long garment and and a bottom, that's considered Islamic clothing. Islamic clothing, not just a qamis only. It used to be 2 parts. Also, they used to wear that. So back home, Indonesia, Somalia, Yemen, all these places, Bangladesh, all those places, they wear that, right? That's that's part of the Islamic clothing. Some lower garment and upper garment. Islamic, that's still Islamic. But what you're going to do is you're going to take these 2 sheets and you're going to make a izar rida. So you're not going to have one that's already made. Right? Just put it on. You're going to take it and you're going to wrap it. And the scholars say then, this is what the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam Sahaba used to do. So therefore that's what we do it. As for the color white, it is not specified it has to be white. There's no evidence that says it can only be white. Rather, it can be any color, but white is preferable because of the hadith, ilbisu min thiyabikum biyad, or right, wear from your clothing white clothing and shroud your dead with them. So scholars say that the white is the best clothing, hence you see people wearing white. When you go to Haram, though, you see people wearing different colors. You're wondering what's going on here. Some have yellow, green. Is it haram? No. But the haram should obviously be just 2 garments. It doesn't have to be a specific color, but white is the best. And scholars say that since you're going to do ibadah, ya bani Adam, khudu zinatakum inda kulli masjid. Take your adornment on every body part. So this is recommended to be white. As for the ihram, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he got us to the ihram, he says, whenever any one of you enters the city ihram, fi izarin wa rida'in wa na'alayn. In a izar, a rida, and your shoes, your sandals. So the scholars say there is the etiquette then, hadith, right? Hadith Ibn Abdullah Ibn Umar. So it can be different colors, but white. And also scholars, they say, it is permissible to tie a belt. And also it's preferable, just my own experience, that you practice wearing the izar before you go out. Okay, brothers, because you don't want to be caught haram life. And somebody's, in a bad state. Because you're not wearing anything underneath it. And some people, they get anxious. What am I going to do? You can wear a belt, akhi. It's okay, it's halal. But that's not necessary. But the point is, you wear it. Because when you spread your legs, that becomes easy to walk. Because if you're going to do Umrah, what are you going to do? You're going to run between the right? Between the green lights. So if it's too tight, you can't walk. Right? So you have to spread your legs when tying it. So this is obviously just this point of experience, right? But the ulama mentioned that you can wear a belt. You can wear also a fanny pack if you want to put money in there. It's all permissible. Some people wear a small bag. All that's fine because it doesn't have anything to do with what you're wearing as the ihram. And it's not to do with stitched either because we said that the word makhil doesn't mean stitched. So those questions then can be answered that way. It doesn't matter. As for the sandals, normal sandals that we know of, you wear those. As for closed shoes, you remove that. You wear the normal sandals. So that's when you go, you have your ihram with you, and have your sandals with you, all that. You take that with you. And since we're traveling by airplane, If you're going to do the ihram in the air, you have all that in your carry-on, that's fine. If you're going to pass the miqat from Medina, for example, you'll just bring it out. Now the Shaykh, rahimahullah, he moves on to the next issue. Issue 985, he says, and they should be clean. Inna Allah jamilun yuhibbu jamal. Allah is beautiful and He loves beauty. So scholars say obviously it should be clean. But what happens if you got it dirty? Yeah, during the airplane, you were eating your dinner, you got some ketchup on it, what are you going to do? Yeah, you can wash it, you're allowed to wash it. But if it has dirt, does it count? Does it affect the ihram? Doesn't, although it does look bad. So that's another thing. Islamically, we shouldn't just leave it. You're allowed to clean it. So the prohibition for the ihram is to perfume it, not to clean it. Clean it is fine. So some people ask the question, if I got it dirty, I went to the hotel, can I change it to something else, clean it and put it back on? Yes. Right? Especially if you haven't performed Umrah yet, for example, or you finished your Hajj, the Umrah right before the Hajj time, you can clean it. You're allowed to. So taking it off also is permitted, right? But you scholars say that if it's for this reason, right? If you're just taking it off for no state, after you already enter the state, no. It's only to clean, right? That's allowed. And in general, Islam teaches us to be clean, right? So scholars, they bring the hadith, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, hadith Sunnah Abi Dawood. He saw one man who had some clothes which were dirty. He said, فَمَا هَذَا يَجِدُ مَاءً, and didn't this person find water? يَغْتَسِلْ ثَوْبَهُ, so he can clean his thawb. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam didn't like that some people walk around with something dirty in your clothing. It's not correct, right? So if you can clean it, it's better, especially when you're doing something like great ibadah like this. Which leads down to the next issue, which is the issue of the 2 rak'ahs. 986, ثُمَّ يُصَلِّ رَكْعَتَيْن, you pray 2 rak'ahs. And here the scholars, they differ. Is there such thing as 2 rak'ahs of ihram or not? Is there such thing as a salah for ihram or not? So the proof for this idea of praying 2 rak'ahs, the hadith Abdullah ibn Umar في Bukhari, he mentions radiyallahu anhuma, that is mentioned that whenever he wanted to go into the state of ihram, he would, when he's coming from Mecca or getting close to Mecca, he will go to the Masjid of Dhul Hulayfa first to do his ihram, everything, for yusalli, and he prayed. Then he rode, and he went all the way, right? So they say that this is the idea of doing it. But another group of scholars say that this concept is not correct. Because even though Ibn Umar, he did it, did Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam do it? Because خُذُوا عَنِّي مَنَاسِكُكُمْ, take your hajj from me. خَيْرُ هَدِي النَّبِي sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So we want to figure out. So the first group of scholars, they say that there is a such thing as Salatul Ihram or 2 rak'atayn al-Ihram, 2 rak'ahs for Ihram. And they bring the hadith of Umar and others. So they said the proof there is such thing as 2 rak'ahs, you do 2 rak'ahs. But the other group of scholars say that no, you do it after any salah. Any salah, fard, you pray, or any salah generally. And this is the more correct opinion. You pray anything. It doesn't have to be specific to rak'ahs. Any salah. So it's not a salah khas. You just do it after any salah. So let's say you went to Dhul Hulayfa at dhuhr time, you prayed jama'ah dhuhr. Then you enter into the state of ihram. Right? So that's what they're trying to do. First you do the salah, then you do it. Whatever salah it is. So what if you're at a time period there's no salah? You go to Tahiyyat Masjid, you can do. Or any other kind of salah you want to do. So recommended to do that, scholars say. So for example, they say you're in a time period where there's no salah. Because they say Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he only entered after salah. Hadith Al-Bukhari, it mentions that he did it after Salat al-Dhuhr. He entered the state of ihram, dubra Salat al-Dhuhr, after Salat al-Dhuhr. So they say that he prayed something, then he did ihram. Not that he did 2 rak'ahs of ihram. And different between the two. So you pray anything, that's legislated, then you go into state of ihram. So example, you come to the masjid, they're already praying, you pray, Masjid Shajara, you pray with them, then you go into the state of ihram. Or let's say the case, there's no salah at that time period, you could do duha, 2 rak'ahs of wudu, anything else like that. Makes sense? So there's no specific salah, just after a salah. Then issue 987. He says after that he enters the state of ihram. وهو أن ينوي الإحرام. After that he makes the intention for the ihram, and he makes that niyyah, because ihram is niyyah. So what is meant by this? So you do everything first, right? You do everything first. So for example, you shower, you perfume yourself, all that stuff. Put on the 2 clothes, then pray a salah. Then after that, do your intention. And the intention is both the heart, in this case also, there's something you're going to say. Right? So it's different than other ibadat in the sense that there's a niyyah, and there's also the idea of pronouncing that, and scholars will talk about it. So the Shaykh says, then you make the niyyah. So the niyyah for ihram, or it depends on what you're doing. If Hajj is Hajj, if Umrah is Umrah. And the scholars say what's meant by niyyah is a statement, you're going to be saying, and what you're doing, and what you're intending. So, for example, the person, if he's going to be doing a type of Hajj, then he's going to need a sacrificial animal, for example. So he's going to have his niyyah, he's going to say it, and he's going to have his sacrificial animal with him. Versus somebody else has a different intention, he has different kind of action. So what's intended, obviously, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. And we already mentioned before, ihram is niyyah. So you couldn't just say, I put on my white garments and ready to go. No, you got to have that niyyah. Which leads to the next point, the Shaykh says, again he mentions, وَيُسْتَحَبُّ, it's recommended, أَن يُنْتَقَ بِهَا, يَنْتِقُ بِهَا, that he mentions it out loud. So here, what is meant by this is saying, Allahumma inni uridu hajj wal umrah, for example. Oh Allah, I intend hajj wal umrah. So the question is this is the next one, the sixth etiquette. Saying it, professing your intention. So if you're doing umrah, or doing hajj, or whatever type, you include it into your niyyah. But the scholars, they said that this recommendation is not correct to say it's a recommendation. Because the Prophet ﷺ, when he did the Hajj Umrah, when he is doing the Ihram, we have no proof he said those wordings. Rather, we know he entered the state with the intention in his heart. And they use the hadith Aisha, Bukhari, Muslim. We went for Hajj, Aisha says, with Rasulullah ﷺ, and some of us made the intention for Hajj, and some has made intention for Umrah, and some for Hajj and Umrah. So the scholars say at the end, there's no need to specify what you're saying. All you do is just say, Labbaik Umratan, or Labbaik Hajjan. You make it general. So that's what you're going to say. And this part, Labbaik, it means Allah at your service. So the intention is in the heart, and the wording you're saying is Labbaik. Right? Oh Allah, Umratan at your service. If it's Hajj, Hajj and Umrah, or Hajj by itself, that's it. You don't have to say Tamattu', I'm doing this one, I'm doing Qiran or Ifrad, because there's three types. You're not going to say that. You're just going to say Labbaik, and whatever you're doing, Umrah or Hajj, that's it. So the intention and then pronunciation of just that statement. And what's important is that this is what you recommend. As for anything else beyond that, specifying what kind of niyyah you're going to make, that's in your heart. Right? The niyyah is in your heart, and the professing in tongue is just that word. Labbaik, Allahumma labbaik. You're going to continue from the talbiyah, but labbaik umrah, that's it. This suffices us. And here the Shaykh then says, after that, when he's inside the state of ihram, or going to make the niyyah, and they're professing it, can he do ishtirat? Can he put a stipulation? And what is meant by this is that somebody might be in a situation where he might not be able to complete, right, his umrah or hajj for whatever reason. So here the scholars, they say that in this situation, that it's allowed to do ishtirat if there's a real reason that somebody might not be able to fulfill it, or is worry. It's permissible. And some scholars even go further and say it's recommended. And they bring some hadith, right? Aisha, Qudamah bin Zubayr, they bring other hadith that show the Prophet taught us how to make stipulation. And the idea first we have to understand is that why would someone do that? So that if they're not able to complete their Hajj or Umrah, they're not sinful, right? If they, wherever they stop, they're going to stop wherever they stop, and that's it. They're not sinful for that, and they're not need to do anything owing on that. But the idea behind it is, like scholars discuss in today's time, there should be some reason behind it. It shouldn't just be that somebody is stipulating this out of any reason. Just, for example, some of the shuyukh say nowadays, Allahu Alam, you could get in a car crash, for example. The idea is a lot of car crash. Should I make ishtirat just in case I get in a car crash and things go downhill? They said no, because you're not intending, it's not a high likelihood, inshallah, that you're not going to get the car crash. So they say this is not necessary, this one. But more like women who are on the menses, or not menses, possibly could be the menses. Or somebody, is afraid that, they're not going to be able to. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told her, Aisha, to say, Allahumma mahilli haytu habastani, wherever you keep me, O Allah, like the place wherever you hold me, wherever you restrain me from being able to make. And the idea behind it is that in that situation, a person has done what's due on them. As for other things which are not there, then it's not correct to stipulate. Scholars say there has to be a reason behind it. which leads then to the different views here. First opinion is you can make it unrestrictedly. Anyone can do it. Stipulation. Whoever feels like doing it. Right? So anyone can say it. Whoever feels like they want to do it. So Allahumma mahilli haythu habastani. Oh Allah, my end stop will be wherever you restrain me. So that means that if I say that whatever happens, happens. I'm not liable. The second view, إِلَّا لِمَنْ كَانَ خَائِفًا. Only one who's afraid. And this is the view of Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah. Someone has actually real fear that he will not be or should not be able to complete their rights. Because the two hadith we're looking at, what's the concern? They're coming to Rasulullah with a concern. Somebody's in pain. Right? Somebody's sick. Right? Somebody, for example, is worried that their menses are going to come or they have some signs. All of these, there's something that's happening here. And this is what view Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah says, and this is the more correct view. Because the one who's not in a state of fear of missing the rights or doing it, then there's no need for it. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam also, he did how many? Right? Umrahs. Yeah? How many times did the Prophet do Umrah? Yeah? 2? No. 4. But how many Hajj? 1. So all those times he never did this. So they say there's no proof. Then someone comes today and says, something could happen to me. Like, just talk Allah. Take taqwa and talk Allah. Go ahead. And that's the better view. And the third view is that it's permissible. Right, so we said the first view is that it's only permissible if there's a need. Second view we said is unrestrictedly permissible. And the third view is that some scholars say you can't do it at all. But that's not a strong view based in front of the evidence. And then the Shaykh moves on to, after this, into the issues of the types of Hajj. Maybe next week, inshallah, we'll go from there. We talk about the types of Hajj and their rulings. So inshallah, we'll stop with that much. And we'll have any quick question. Yeah. So 2 rak'ahs, they're doing ihram after praying any salah, 2 rak'ahs or any salah, it's recommended. It's not valid, it's not a condition for the validity of the ihram, it's recommended. So everything we mentioned right now, right, they're adab, they're etiquettes, right? And some of them obviously are not etiquettes, but they're necessary. So this one is just recommended. So if you couldn't do it, no problem. Yes. So maybe you just left when we were mentioning, yeah. So he explained that the niyyah, scholars have 2 opinions. One opinion you have in the heart and you say it. Allahumma inni uridu hajj umrah. But qawl sahih, you don't say it. You just say labbaik umrah, labbaik hajj, or labbaik umrah wa hajj. So niyyah is there and that's what you're saying. Labbaik hajj is service. That's what you do. And that counts. As of saying what I'm going to do, it's like any other ibadah. We don't say it in niyyah. So this labbaik is, because again, you hear people saying that it's not allowed we say generally, a niyyah is always in the qalb, mahalluha qalb. Then people will come and say, Bahaba hajj umrah. Yeah, I'm sure you heard this argument. Say, brother, hajj umrah, the Prophet said, I'm doing a hajj, no sum'a wa riyaan. So it's allowed to do talaffuz. You can say it. And we tell them, look, first of all, that issue is khilaf. So what you're resting on is wrong. Right? And secondly, every other ibadah we know, niyyah is in the heart. So that's the better view. Yes. So if you make an intention and Hajj? Okay. So brother's asking, when inside the haram, there's certain rules. There's some things you can do. So if someone's trying to sin, major or minor, or some kind of violation, it's not, so the intention here means someone's resolved, has resolved to do it, yes, it's considered a sin. As Islam, sins are not just a passing thought, someone intending to do wrong. So we'll get to, when you're inside the haram, there are etiquette. For example, you can't pluck the trees, you can't hunt, you can't harm the people, this one. This is more severe there. So let's say someone is in there, is doing something haram, it's more severe. But when we say intend, it means intend with resolve to do it. Now, for example, something bad comes to your mind, it's not. We're not held accountable for that. Islam, niyyah, azam, resolve, niyyah, someone wants to do it and he's going to intend to do it. But also, what will come later. In the haram, there's etiquette. When you're there, you have to not just behave yourself, but you have to remember this is the sanctuary of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a sacred place. Just like in Medina is also haram. Also in haram, and we talked about before the radius of it. Okay, one more, yes. So makhiyat, this word, the fuqaha used it after to refer to clothing that separates body parts and limbs. But the literal wording means stitched, and the reason why they use stitched is because regular clothes are often stitched. But the fuqaha used the term, not the salaf. The early salaf did not use that terminology. So that's where the confusion came, because in order to express what you can wear, they use this word. And then the ulama say today's time causes confusion, because people are saying that, okay, my belt is stitched. But that's not what the fuqaha were saying. The clothes like qamis has stitches, and that's clothing you shouldn't wear. So the scholars say to change the definition back to any clothes that separates the body parts, like sleeves and legs. This is makhiyat. So that's very important. But that was their logic. They used that language because they found it often was stitched. But then now you have people asking, can I wear a belt, or even your shoes are stitched? What are you going to do about that, right? So that's why, inshallah, it becomes better to use clear language to stop the confusion. Okay, maybe one more here, and you had one, inshallah, and then one more there. So for the ankle, the correct opinion is it's not a must, but usually sandals are on below the ankle, so it's better to have a sandal like that. But scholars say one hadith, the Prophet said, whoever doesn't have it, he takes his shoes and he cuts it. So scholars say that's the etiquette in general, the sandals are below the ankle. But if it's not, then it's not necessarily wrong, but it should be a sandal. So now full closed shoes, that's what should be avoided, the ones we wear like regulars. So usually when you have sandals, it's just to slip on, that's they say it's preferable. But you see some hadith just say na'alayn, and some they say that it said below the ankle, and some say if you don't have it, then cut it below the ankle, and some they say that's abrogated. Right, so at the end of the day, it's like any footwear. But the idea is it shouldn't be like, again, what we have nowadays, rather just regular sandals. That's the best. Below the ankle, safer to be avoiding all that issue. Wallahu a'lam. Someone had one, yes? When was the 4 umrahs? Well, we have to go to Sirah, right? But anyone can give us an example of one of them. To help, brother? Yeah. Allah too. So who can help? Anyone knows? Allah too? Yeah? Come back from Battle Hunayn? There's another one there? Allah, for me, I can't think of the other 4 Shaykh right now in my head. Someone's going to help us here. I'm going to get back to you with that. I can't think of Allah Alam. I can't remember the other 2, the exact dates. But there are 4. But that one they mentioned. Inshallah, maybe after we'll get it for you. One more question here, inshallah. And afterwards, we'll get asked. So yeah, people, they do some, funny stuff, right? They go for Umrah, then they make dua, they don't get arrested by the police. But when they catch you with your visa, they say Umrah, you're risking more than Hajj, you might not come back. So the scholars say that's not allowed to do that, because this kind of smuggling and other things is breaking the rules, the nidam, it's for the maslahah of the people. So let's say someone can't afford it, he's going to do it. First of all, he could get caught. But secondly, the scholars say that if someone cannot afford it, it's not wajib. But what's not allowed to do is to smuggle, with the wrong visa, or no visa, or go on to make because the scholars say that the timing, the place, and the visas are given based on the capacity. And now people are going to come. But it's a count, it counts. It counts, but you should have done that. It's like that we said before, a poor person comes, he has no money. He just hopped a ship ride, he made it to Jeddah, then he made it there. He has nothing. And the scholars say that's why Allah said, take your provisions. And from today's time is the visa and the paperwork. So it's not a good thing. We find people doing it. It counts, but it shouldn't be done. Allahu a'lam. Inshallah, we'll end with this one. Subhanak bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.